And welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Glad you're with us here as spring starts to roll into Oklahoma.
Thunderstorms, that's good.
We have about everything around here, don't we?
We do, and we're going to have a good show today.
We are.
We're going to be talking about texting while driving. No, don't do it.
You know how many people right now are texting while they're watching our show? Probably.
All four of them?
Probably texting each other.
Yeah.
It should be a good show, though. But, you know, texting while driving is increasing the likelihood of accidents on the road. We're trying to make the roads safer. So there's some information today that I think will help people.
Yes, we have State Representative Sue Tibbs going to join us today. She's sponsoring legislation that will affect that rather dramatically. And she's going to tell us about that legislation and how it's progressing.
And it's coming up today on The Verdict.
A greener planet, cleaner air, a healthy economy, national security, a smaller deficit and a stronger dollar, green jobs, better jobs, energy independence, warmth and light and transportation. These are the reasons Chesapeake champions natural gas every day.
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
And welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Today we're really fortunate to have the Honorable Sue Tibbs join us. She is the state representative from District 23 in Tulsa. She's a Republican. She was born and raised in Tulsa, attended Tulsa Junior College, had a very successful career in private business, and in 2001 was elected to the State House of Representatives and has served there with distinction ever since. She is the chairman of the Public Safety Committee of the House of Representatives, and in that capacity she's been very active to try to do things in Oklahoma that will make things safer for all of us, and for that we're grateful. This is her first visit to The Verdict. Sue, sure glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's nice to have you on the set of The Verdict. How'd you get interested in politics?
Actually, I worked in politics most of my life, from the time I registered to vote, which was immediately upon becoming 21. You had to be 21 at that time. And I just worked in many, many campaigns. Governor Keating called me and asked me to run, and so I did. And it took me 2 times to win.
And that was in 2000, well, I guess you won in 2000.
Yes.
So you ran in 98 as well?
I did.
Huh? And how's it gone for you?
Well, it's been exciting. I really have enjoyed it. I enjoy being involved. There are times when you think, well, gee, I wish I didn't have to make this vote or this decision, but that's what you're there for.
You are working on House Bill 3250. Would you explain to us exactly what that's about?
I will. This act could certainly be cited as the state ban on texting while driving law. And the purpose of it is to improve highway safety for everyone driving a vehicle, as well as the passengers, bicyclists, motorcyclists, pedestrians, anyone using the road system. The number 2 reason is to prevent crashes that are related to text messaging while driving. And number 3, it reduces injuries, deaths, and it also property damage. It reduces health care costs. and health care and automobile rates that are typically associated with automobile crashes.
Right. We have a comic strip that you brought along with us that might bring a common sense perspective to this issue. You want to read this to us as we go to the monitor and take a look at it?
Yes. Honk if you love Jesus. Text while driving if you'd like to meet him.
That puts it very well.
Yeah.
But what motivated you to bring this legislation that would end texting while driving?
Well, it actually did. I did this last year, and it passed committee, but it did not get a floor
it's a
hearing.
carryover.
It is a carryover. We improved it a great deal. I do applaud the governor for doing what he did about not allowing people to text while driving if they're state employees, because certainly that put all of us at a liability risk, the whole state of Oklahoma. But actually I had a constituent that's a highway patrol trooper, and he came to me and he said he'd been observing people's driving habits become more erratic. So he decided to just watch those people, see what they were doing, what was causing this. And he realized that people were actually texting or they were using a cell phone. So he just sat there on the side of the road in many different places that he monitors, and he found that this was going on more and more, and it was becoming a huge problem. So he came to me and he said, would you run some kind of legislation to maybe bring this dangerous practice into control? And so that is how it all got started.
Well, that shows the real value of constituent input, does it not?
It does.
I guess you have a good relationship with your constituents generally.
Yes, I do.
I can see why. Well, you also are handling this bill as chairman of the Public Safety Committee. This does certainly fit within that jurisdiction, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
Is there, you have co-sponsors?
I'm not sure that anyone has co-sponsored the bill, but I believe it passed the committee with only maybe 2 or 3 no votes.
Now, when a bill comes before the legislature, there's all sorts of interest groups who line up for it or line up against it. What are you seeing from there? Who are your helpful agents out there helping you?
Actually, I've not had anyone come to me and say they were against it. Almost everyone has said they're for this, even the telephone companies. So I think it's something that they see it's very dangerous and they want to bring it under control.
What do the insurance agencies think?
They ask us to put some additional information, or language rather, in the bill and concerning young drivers, and so we have done that. And interesting enough, the insurance aid, the real estate people have come and said, we just love your bill.
Now, why would they care so much about property damage?
I really think that, well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think that, but they, excuse me. You can take
It
that
could
out.
just be a quality of life issue for them.
It could be.
Yeah. Well, what have the recent statistics shown about the harm of distracted driving? Are there numbers out there that kind of give us an idea of how much of an impact this could be? Are we talking 1 out of 100 accidents? Are we talking 1 out of 10? What type of benefit could occur if people would stop texting while they drive?
Well, texting while driving has become very trendy, and it's very dangerous. And AAA actually did a test, or data, on young people driving while texting, and they found that 46% of teens text while they're driving.
Wow.
That is astonishing.
It is.
And in 2009, more than 135 billion texts were sent or received in the United States. And that was an actual increase of 80% over 2008. So texting, they found, was 23% riskier than using a cell phone while driving.
So your bill would not affect people who choose to have a hands-free phone call or a hands-on phone call. It would just affect the actual texting, the actual punching into the data.
That is correct, except for the graduated driving permits. These are young people.
The younger students.
The younger
Yeah.
people.
And how would they be affected?
They will be affected in that if they are a permit holder, they are forbidden to use the phone at all.
I see. So if they haven't gotten their complete driver's license yet
Right.
and they're under the permit process, they would not be allowed to.
Correct. And obviously, there's going to be somebody in the seat beside them. Also, if they've graduated beyond that, they can only use a cell phone if they feel that there's an emergency
Okay.
or they
Well,
feel in danger.
let's get to a break and come back, and we're going to talk more about this because I'd like to know what's going on in other states across the country. Would Oklahoma be the only state that's interested in doing this, or if other states have done it, what's been their experience? We're visiting with Sue Tibbs. She's the author of a bill, number 3250, which would eliminate the concept of texting while driving on Oklahoma state roads. We'll be right back.
My name is Wyatt Parker. I am 20 years old. I am a composer and I am a Chickasaw. The way I prefer to express myself is through music. I like all the obvious guys, you know, Mozart, Beethoven. The way that I like to come up with music is really not to come up with it at all. I just like for it to kind of appear in my head. It's about listening. You have to be a good listener in music as in life. I would say the Chickasaw Nation stands for its people. I would want to be known as a Chickasaw composer who is trying to do great things with music. With all the opportunities that the Chickasaw Nation is offering its people, it's a great time to be a Chickasaw.
In Oklahoma, with the technology that's being developed every day, it would be difficult to get much better than it is now, but I anticipate that it will.
Technology is always going to improve. It's always going to get better, and as it does, these fields will give up more and more of their natural resources.
I think with technology and the way they're doing it, it'll be a good, clean, environmental place, and I'm blessed to be here.
The oil and gas industry runs deep in our history and gives us a sense that we have a really strong future ahead of us.
Welcome back to the set of the verdict. Mick Cornett, Kent Myers, and State Representative Sue Tibbs, who has introduced a bill called number 3250, which would outlaw texting while driving. Kent?
Well, Sue, you're to be congratulated because you were actually ahead of the governor on this matter. You introduced your bill last year, and
Yes, I
the
did.
governor, I guess, didn't issue his executive order until this year. So you were ahead of the game on trying to meet what has turned out to be a pretty serious problem. You're to be congratulated for that.
Thank you.
Well, exactly what does texting do to increase the danger? If someone said, why is this a big problem? I still have another hand. What would your answer be?
Well, I have read where Car and Driver magazine recently had their editor in a car that was rigged with a red light indicating to him when he was to brake. They had him drive 70 miles an hour. They tested him when he was sober. They tested him when he was legally drunk, and they tested him when he was reading an email, and then they tested him when he was texting. And the results were just astonishing. And here they are.
Okay.
Unimpaired, 0.54 seconds to brake, or 14 feet reactive distance. Legally drunk, add 4 feet, so that made it 18 feet reactive distance. Reading an email, 129 feet. But sending a text message was 319 feet reactive distance.
So I mean, it's clear, I guess, but it's good to emphasize it, that the real detriment of this is just the slowing down of the reaction time or not knowing that something's happening that you ought to adjust to and stop the car.
That's true, and you know, when we stop and think about somebody tapping out a message on a cell phone that's a little larger than a credit card, and then you take that show on the road, you think 65 miles an hour, 3,000 tons of steel, basically out of control. That's very dangerous.
Okay. What kind of reception have you had at the state legislature? What do your cohorts down at the Capitol think?
Well, we've had a pretty good reception. I believe that they're seeing the dangers of it as we more and more read about accidents. In Tulsa alone, we had a young man texting, ran into a pole, and actually had people out of electricity for hours upon hours. Just things like that. Mm-hmm. And I do think that they're seeing that Oklahoma wants some restriction on this behavior.
Mm-hmm. And are you getting enough support, and is it bipartisan? Are Republicans and Democrats both lining up to support or like the bill?
I believe it is nonpartisan because they actually understand and see for themselves. They too drive the roads, mm-hmm. and they can see what's happening as they're driving.
What do you expect the break-in time, if you will, for this legislation to start having effect? If it would get past this session, when do you have it becoming effective?
It does have an emergency on it,
So
it would be as soon as the governor signed it.
And then we ought to be able to see over a reasonable period of time after that some kind of results about how it's, what effect it's having.
Yes, because in the bill, we also authorize the law enforcement to issue a citation to anyone texting while driving as a primary offense.
And what is the penalty for that?
It's $1,000.
You mentioned some numbers.
That's an expensive text.
It is.
It better be important, doesn't it?
Pay
Yes.
your phone bill for a few months. Do the numbers indicate that younger or older drivers have a different reaction time while they're texting? In other words, if some young person said, you know, I can do this, maybe my parent or grandparent can't text and drive at the same time, but I can do this. Is there data that would refute that?
I'm not sure there's data that would refute that. However, everything I've studied does not break that apart. But let's go back to the 46% of the teens that text. So I would think that they're the ones that are involved in a lot of these statistics.
What are other states doing? Oklahoma is not the only state looking at this. I know some states have gone forward with it. What's going on there? Well,
I think, too, that as they're seeing more and more fatalities in their states, they're beginning to ban this dangerous practice. It is my understanding that 19 states have actually banned texting altogether.
And
is it while driving? Yeah.
Is
Yes.
it trending up? Are there more that are currently looking at it along with Oklahoma?
I believe so.
Do you know if there's any states who have had a bill introduced but have voted and decided not to go forward?
I don't know.
Okay.
Do you ever get any pushback on your bill by people who might say something like, well, I just don't want government getting involved in my how I drive my car. That's a personal thing to me, and I ought to be able to do it the way I want to do it. Have you got any reaction like that?
I have. I've had people say to me that it's an intrusion. It's actually stepping on their rights. And actually my answer to them is, you know, if you cause an accident while texting and driving and you kill me or my grandchild, then you've infringed on my rights.
Yeah, any kind of criminal law is an infringement on your rights. That same argument could be applied to, well, we shouldn't have a murder penalty because you're infringing on my right to murder somebody.
Right.
And this is not a lot different.
Let's switch gears here and talk about the legislative session in general. What's going on down at the state capitol, and what makes this year's session different from the others that you've attended?
It's amazing to me how we have started off at such a huge pace. Usually before we start kind of low and we build to a crescendo, it seemed that we started at a crescendo this year.
And whom do you credit for that?
Well, I think there's an attitude among all people. I think people are afraid. I think they're angry. They're angry at government. So they're pushing harder. Things are just different than they have been in the 10 years that I've been there.
Are you hearing from your constituents a different level of anger or angst about elected employees? And maybe they're directing it at Washington, and maybe they're directing it at you or people in Oklahoma City at the Capitol. But are you sensing there's a little bit more animosity?
Yes, I am sensing that. And so oftentimes they don't realize that you're not in Washington. They will actually say, well, how are things in Washington, you know, and you say, no, I'm in Oklahoma City. So sometimes they don't understand the difference.
Yeah.
Well, you have one more session and then your term limited out.
That is correct.
Do you have any general impressions now that you've come from the private sector, served a number of years, 8 or 9 years as it will be in the public sector, and then are leaving to go back to the private sector? Do you have any impressions of term limits? Are you generally in favor of it, generally opposed to it? What's your view about that?
Before I came in, I thought it was a good thing. And when I came into the House, I realized that you're losing so much institutional knowledge with term limits. And actually, term limits should be at the polls. If somebody isn't doing a good job, they should be voted out. But if they are doing a good job, maybe they should be able to stay for a lot of years, if that's what it takes. Because it's just different, you find, that, and it worries me in that I'm thinking, who is going to be running the government when you're term limiting out all the time?
Well, people are having to start all over, I guess, and learn everything from the ground up.
Yes, and so oftentimes you think, or I have seen in the last few years with the term limits kicking in, things that have come forward that we've voted down before because we thought it was a bad idea, and yet, let me interject here that I don't think lobbyists are bad people. I think they're good people, but sometimes they will bring bills forward to new people that don't understand the process. They don't understand this bill has not gone forward before. It sounds like a great idea, so that worries me.
Well, you had a good bit of background in the political process, although not as an elected representative, before you ever ran for election. I guess that equipped you a little better to deal with the lobbyist situation and what goes on at the Capitol than others might have.
Actually, it didn't.
Didn't?
It really didn't. But just going out and knocking doors for somebody doesn't really tell you the whole story of what goes on in Oklahoma City. But I have found that lobbyists, for the most part, are very honest. If you ask them the downside of a bill, they'll be honest to you about that, and I think that's important too. And if you have a constituent that has a problem, they're more than willing to jump in and help.
Well, what's the timetable of this bill 3250 that you've introduced to outlaw texting while driving? When would we think we might see a vote down the line?
We're going to see a vote sometime this week.
Okay, so
Good.
Okay, so as people watch this show, it may already have been looked at or it may have been delayed, but the chances are that this has been addressed and they'll be looking at it down the line. Well, Sue, thanks very much for coming on our show, and thank you for doing all the homework and deciding that this was an issue that was in the best interest of the state of Oklahoma and pushing forward with the passion that you've exhibited here on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for sponsoring something that will protect all of us.
Representative Sue Tibbs out of Tulsa, who has introduced a bill to outlaw texting. Kent and I'll have a final word right after this. Stay with us.
It's time to meet the new people in power.
The people responsible for our energy future.
It's you.
It's me. All of us together.
From now on, we're the people in power.
OG&E will supply the power.
It's how we apply the power that counts.
We've got to use electricity smarter,
Wiser.
cleaner,
Better.
So we've got to be informed,
Equipped.
prepared.
committed.
From now on.
Look, nobody wants to waste energy.
Nobody wants to build new power plants.
Nobody wants to pay more for electricity.
But nobody wants to give up their way of life.
We don't have to.
If we just use positive energy together.
I'll take advantage of off-peak hours.
That means cutting energy use from 1 to 7 every day.
Every day.
I'm going to sign up for more and more wind power.
We'll take advantage of the high-tech tools coming soon from OG&E.
OG&E can't do it alone.
It's you and OG&E working together.
Find dozens of ways you can help at OGE.com.
A positive energy future is in our power. Together.
And Blankenship has stopped at the line of scrimmage. No gain on the play. Leaving it 4th and 7 on the Tiger 46-yard line. 38 seconds on the clock. The Tigers have no choice but to go for it. Wiggins in to do the kicking. Here's the snap. And the kick is away.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information. And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
We're back on The Verdict. It'll be interesting to follow this issue, not only in Oklahoma, but across the country. Texting while driving, proven dangerous, but our state's going to actually outlaw it.
Well, it looks like they're on the way to doing it, and I was astounded at some of the, if you're watching the quotes on the, between the segments on our show, there's some stats out of a UK study that shows that texting is a good bit more harmful or dangerous while driving than driving drunk or driving while high on marijuana. Insofar as reaction time is concerned, and those are startling and scary stats.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see how our state legislature deals with it. Sue Tibbs, the author of the bill, she's a representative out of Tulsa. And we got some good guests coming up. I think next week Marianne Bowman's coming back.
Dr. Bowman is coming back to give us some health tips, and certainly we can use those. And she's always a bright, fun guest.
And that'll be here next week on The Verdict. Join our website, theverdict.tv. We'll see you next time.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.